Before we start, take a moment to like and subscribe. Imagine a world without cars, trains, or planes. How would you get from your home to a big city or even to a different country? That's exactly what people in the Middle Ages had to figure out. Travel was a huge, exciting, and sometimes scary adventure. Get ready to discover what it was like to explore the world hundreds of years ago. In the Middle Ages, the main way to travel was by using your own 2 feet. Most people, regardless of their social class, walked everywhere they needed to go. It was a slow but steady way to get around. Travelers would wear tough leather boots and carry a strong walking stick to help them up hills and through bumpy paths. Roads weren't paved like they are today. They were often just dusty trails in the summer and muddy, impassable ruts in the rain. Horses. A person with enough money could ride a horse. This was much faster and more comfortable than walking, but it was still a long and bumpy ride. A journey that takes us a few hours today would take medieval travelers many days or even weeks of riding. The type of horse you rode often showed your status. A knight might ride a powerful war horse called a destrier, while a wealthy lady or merchant might prefer a palfrey for its smoother, more comfortable gait. For carrying luggage, they used strong pack horses, known as sumpter horses, carts and carriages. For very important people, or for carrying heavy things, there were carts pulled by oxen or horse. These were basically big wooden boxes on wheels, so they were super bumpy. They would creak and groan as they rolled along, and a big group of travelers might follow a cart, hoping it would stay on the right path. Oxen were often used for their strength on difficult terrain, while horses were preferred for speed on better roads. Riverboats and sailing ships. When people needed to travel over water, they would use boats. On rivers, long flat boats called barges were used to carry goods from one town to another. When people needed to cross a big ocean, they would get on a big sailing ship, such as a cog or a galley. The trip could take a very long time, and sailors had to be very careful about strong winds and big waves. Ocean travel was also very expensive, so it was mostly used for long-distance trade. Voyages were completely dependent on the wind and weather, so a journey that was supposed to take a week might last for months. The roads in the Middle Ages weren't smooth and easy like ours. They were just dirt paths, full of rocks, mud, and holes. At night, there were no streetlights, so you could barely see a thing. To stay safe, travelers would often travel in a group. It was always better to travel with friends or a group of other travelers. It was more fun, and you could help each other if you got lost or had a problem. Traveling in a big group was also a good way to stay safe from robbers or highwaymen who sometimes lurked in the woods, especially near bridges, forests, or other isolated spots. These groups could be formal caravans or simply a few families who decided to travel together for protection. Look out for wild animals. The woods were full of wild animals. Travelers had to be very careful, especially when setting up camp for the night. They'd build large campfires and take turns keeping watch. Attacks from wolves, wild boars, or even bears were a real threat, and travelers needed to be prepared to defend themselves. Be ready for anything. The environment itself was a danger. Travelers had to be ready for sudden floods from heavy rains, thick fog that could lead them astray, or deep snow that could block a path for days. Simple accidents were also a major concern. A sprained ankle or a broken cartwheel could be a life-threatening problem far from any help. Read the signs. Instead of modern road signs, medieval travelers had to rely on landmarks like big rocks, tall trees, or a bend in a river. You had to be very good at remembering directions. This is why many people hired a guide if they were traveling to a new and unfamiliar area. Getting lost could mean a lack of food and water, which was a very real danger. Sometimes a stone cross or a specific carving on a tree would mark a path to a monastery or town. Then there are different kinds of people who were traveling in the Middle Ages, like knights and their retinues. These brave fighters didn't just stay in their castles. They often traveled to visit other castles, fight in tournaments, or go on long journeys for diplomacy or war. They would ride their strong horses and wear their shining armor, looking for glory and adventure. But a knight never traveled alone. They had a special helper called a squire, who carried their gear, looked after their horses, and helped with everything on the journey. A knight's group, or retinue, might also include pages and men-at-arms, turning a simple trip into a small army on the move. Merchants with cool stuff. Merchants were like treasure hunters. They traveled from town to town and country to country, carrying amazing goods to trade, like spices, silk, or precious gems from faraway lands. They would often travel in groups for safety and to share the costs of the journey. They were very important because they brought news and exotic goods from all over the world, often setting up stalls at huge trade fairs where people came from miles around to buy and sell. Pilgrims on a holy journey. A pilgrim is a person who travels to a special holy place. Many people in the Middle Ages went on a pilgrimage to visit famous churches, the tombs of saints, or holy sites like Jerusalem or Rome. It was a long journey and a way to show how much they believed. And it was often a form of penance or seeking a cure. They would often walk for weeks or months, and their special uniform included a long cloak, a wide-brimmed hat, and a little bag. A pilgrim staff was essential for the long walk, and a badge or emblem, like a seashell for the pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, was pinned to their hats to show others where they had been. Troubadours and entertainers. These were the traveling rock stars of the Middle Ages. Troubadours would wander from town to town, singing songs and telling stories in exchange for food and a place to sleep. They would play musical instruments like the lute or a simple drum. They were super important because they brought news, songs, and laughter to people who lived far from the big cities. You might also see traveling jugglers, acrobats, or even puppeteers with their little puppet shows. Journeymen and apprentices. Imagine you're learning to be a baker or a blacksmith. In the Middle Ages, you would be an apprentice, and once you were old enough and good enough, you would become a journeyman. This meant you had to travel to different towns to learn from different masters. A journeyman traveled from place to place, looking for new work and learning new skills. It was a great way to see the world while getting a job, to finally become a master of their craft. A journeyman had to create a special piece of work, known as a masterpiece. Traveling was exhausting. So where did people stay when they were far from home? Bumpy inns. Towns had inns, which were like small, cozy hotels. They were often noisy places where you could get a simple meal of ale and hearty stew, along with a bed to sleep in. Inns were filled with the smells of a warm fire, delicious food, and the sounds of people talking and laughing. The beds weren't always comfy, often just straw-filled mattresses, and you might have to share a room with other travelers, sometimes even a huge communal bed. It was a great way to meet new people and hear exciting stories. Friendly monasteries. If an inn was too expensive or too far away, travelers could often stay at a monastery, which was a special place where monks lived. The monks were very kind and believed it was important to help travelers as a charitable act. They would give them a warm meal and a place to rest their heads. A monastery was a quiet, peaceful place, a safe and calm stop on a busy journey, though visitors had to respect the monks' rules and way of life. Family, castles, and the open road. For those traveling a well-known route, a traveler might stop at the home of a relative or a friend. This was the most comfortable and safest option. A traveler with connections might also be granted temporary lodging in a noble's castle or a fortified manor. For those with no other choice, camping out in the open was common, but it left them exposed to the elements and other dangers. Traveling in the Middle Ages was more than just a trip. It was a real-life adventure filled with new sights, new friends, and a little bit of danger. It took a lot of courage to set out on the open road, but it was the only way to see the amazing world and bring back fantastic stories to tell.